Now, what could be the association of two things that are the opposite? Well, in the opposite ends, there's over-accentuations. The definition of an over-accentuation is only in defiant in its opposite end, the other over-accentuations. Accentuation, we're not to multiples yet. Being the division of two of them would suggest the middle would have a definite location. Ergo, the multiple over-accentuations that would circum after an entire convection. An entire convection would only surface once the over-accentuations have been properly dismantled from the thing being convected, so that the middle would have a definite location despite the two over-accentuations being seen, where only they would be able to induce themselves from the base being vacant. This is what I'd like to call freelancing, and it has to do with latency. The latency is similar to cytoplasm because it's transparent. Oftentimes it's said an opposites attract, where a cytoplasm, being the opposite of a double helix, where the inert ability for both of them to exchange messages could be equal for that mere fact that they would be opposites within the same embodiment. I'd often question, why is DNA so fantastic if it doesn't have any facets? Now, as complex as that question may be, it's probably as easy as understanding the uniqueness of cytoplasm. Why I'm bringing this to your attention would be that the cytoplasm doubles as an intricacy, mainly because its embodiment is free motioned. That's the opposite of what a DNA construct, the double helix, would be made to be. So one reason why the dinosaurs didn't survive a meteor crash wasn't because they were short-handed. No, these ran in packs and they were really big. Do you know how many senses that you have in comparison to a dinosaur? You know, with a bigger body, you have more unique adaptations. And a dinosaur is no exception to that simple fact. But how great were they? Especially in the aquatic, if there was one that survived way after the meteor strike because it was underwater. I think that's the basis of Bluetooth, is syncing up. And succinctly, if something small, the as above, so below would come into play. And with this being said, the microbes have a gigantic advance when it comes to symmetrics of geometries, and in accordance of smaller to large. In the constitution of on earth as it is in heaven, and then that's like a Buddha complex of whatever heaven might be, as being not the same size, but literally the same place, where that would be the ultimate example of achieving a calibration. When someone has like a golden throat, that's like, wow, he has such a great sound coming out of his throat that it would be the same if it were in a holy place, the holiest places of all. A Zen garden is a small thing the size of your palm, and you get a miniature rake and you can scrape it, and then with a giant beach you can achieve the same by using your hands and scraping around you. Especially if it's being pushed sand down a hill, it's almost as though it was raking a small rake around a rock, because the crevice of the sand spilling over is somewhat similar. I don't know what a Buddha complex is, but there's a Japanese song where they've got one, and so I'm going to address it in the following. When you're really big or really small, or your environment is one of the two, it's able to mimic a complexion. And so what that means is even though it's not actual size, it can be just as powerful as a thing big, or a concentration that is enhanced by being small. What this means is you don't have to conform yourself to either to achieve any of them, simply just by being adequate in its persona. A persona of an environment would have to match geometrically to be significant, despite it not being the size. If you have the angles right within geometrics, the solutions will be so similar that would constitute an identity, which would mean it's the same calibration. When it comes to articulation, there's a vast array of different differentiations, and banking off of the myth, it is the underdog's Cinderella story, not to be a catch-22, but to deliver an on-time delivery. The Americans, they go on on-time delivery systems quite frequently, and it's not to undermine business, but to be able to elapse the agriculture on a certain playing field that would give it an equal deviation. It's what the Democrats would be saying, equal opportunity for everyone. To me, what this means is, if you're walking in a parallel and there's a perpendicular, being able to go from a diagonal from either can only be accomplished if you're leaning into it. For example, if I'm, and then there's the feminist movement, when they make that tone in their voice, and it's as though they're trying to regulate what has been made as a disadvantage. And you can take however you want and leave it just as it is, but for some reason, they always want something that I don't know if it's different than what I have, because I'm not quite sure what the emphasis for initial demeaning would have been in the first place. But back to this example, a parallel perpendicular with a banking off of this and a diagonal of 90-degree separation only if you're leaning forward to it. I'd like to give one prerequisite of a ping pong ball. A ping pong ball, if it's hit not from a paddle, can achieve a trajectory from off of your knuckle if it's in 2 degrees of freedom. One being that you have a hard knuckle and you're hitting it with a fluid motion. The second being if you pull it. If you hit it straight, then the straight hit will be lackluster and probably be like a dud in a firecracker when it doesn't pop right. It's from its placement being offset. But if you pull it, meaning if you are swiping as you're moving your arm forward, you're leaning into the shot with your hand, and if you hit the ball with your knuckle and your hand is guiding it to the side, it'll be as though if it hit your paddle, if done correctly. So with that prerequisite in mind, the following is an example of when, if you're on a boardwalk, it can seem like a teeter-totter, but it takes two to tango in this scenario. let's say you're walking on the far right of a board, and it's a boardwalk, so there's multiple of these planks. And then someone walks, excuse me, I spit because I'm outside, and then someone walks to the left. And that just when you're abreast, meaning you're side to side. And another note on feminism, when someone says breast, it's like the word ass. It's able to be used on TV, and it's in the Bible. For male or female, it has nothing to do with male or female. A male can have breast cancer, and a male can have breasts. These are disgusting because they're not supposed to be there, and they look like if they were any smaller, they would try to be inside of you. And so with the breast being a breast, I shall continue as this example needs motion to carry through. So once you're on the right, they're on the left. Whoever weighs more would, same as a teeter-totter, be pushing down further. Despite the time differentiation, whoever steps down on it first will gain that advance. Once it is stepped on, the plank will be moving to the left or the right. But if whoever steps on it is leaning forward as they walk, because you're leaning forward as you walk forward, and the person going the opposite direction would be leaning to your back position. In any case, as the plank moves onto the side and you are moving forward, it's the parallel to its perpendicular. However, the emphasis is rolling your foot forward as your motion of continuation forward. You're able to bank off of its miss and move forward as it's moving upwards. This is a double jump, but on an axis of complexity that you are able to control with your ankle. And it's what makes sewing so great with the old sewing machines, and how Rumpelstiltskin was able to conduct gold thread from wheat. And wheat, if you know anything about it, is silos can get molded if you don't check it right. Your wheat, when you cut it open, it has to be wet. Then if it is, then you don't put it in your silo. In a rope, the cross thread intricacy, winding it up will shove it through.